All right. Yeah. So, Sophia, I'm going to intro you and then we'll get into some questions. So, you're the founder of, is it ArtxCode? How do you say it?
ArtxCode.
ArtxCode.
Yeah.
ArtxCode, which is a generative art house specializing in artist management, curation, and cultural advisory. And you're also a professor of algorithmic art history at NYU. So, like covering the gamut in the generative art world. So, yeah, I think actually the first question I wanted to ask was maybe just around kind of speed running the course that you teach. So like what are the few core ideas that you really want to instill in students over the course of the year?
I think more than anything, the giants that we stand on right now in the digital art space, I think that's really like the biggest thing, kind of focusing what has been happening since the 50s, 60s, especially 70s, 80s, where I think it's kind of like a lost, two decades that people don't really speak about when it comes to digital art history. Kind of going in on net art, well, we like the internet, all of these things, and then kind of leaning at the end how social media and blockchain has really kind of exploded all of this, but also kind of looking at it from a foundational level, being able to look at it with a critical eye. And, over the last few years, I've kind of come up with my own framework of how to look at and critique code-based artwork. So not only just looking at the visual aesthetic, kind of taking a look at how these artists um, structure their code, how is it written, and kind of doing that sort of like holistic approach on it. A lot of my students, like it will be with the master's program, they've all learned how to code at some point. So I'm happy that I won't have to teach them how to do that from the beginning, because that's actually typically what the last 10 years I've taught young students, or mostly young girls, how to make art with code. So it'll be nice not to have to teach that to grad students. We can kind of just talk more about the history and get into it. And hopefully, we can get a little bit more, like more curators, more artists that kind of just have the history to lean back on versus kind of starting from scratch. This is really a dream course for me. It's something I wish I could have taken while I was in college. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that history is an important one. I sort of discovered generative art with art blocks, and,
Mhm.
it was, uh, a friend who's like, "This reminds me of Ethereum. It's this thing with a random generator." I was like, "Oh, that's fucking cool."
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is exactly what you're talking about, like the deep and long history of the pioneers in the space, and the innovation and pioneering work done in a world where it was almost, I don't know, it wasn't viewed as art in some
Mhm.
way, in the
Oh, not
traditional
at all.
way.
Not at all. Oh my
I
god.
wonder if you could sort of touch on some of that history or that dynamic.
Oh yeah, I mean, they were hated. Oh my God, are you kidding me? There's a Manfred Moore. He got eggs thrown at him. I mean, he had a whole campaign like Moore is death. He had, I think it was a little over 50 years ago. He had an exhibition at a museum in Paris. So honestly, good on the museum for allowing him to come in and bring his plotters and show it. And he had this wall panel where he asked in French, what are your thoughts with basically, it's like, what are your thoughts of the aesthetics done with the aid of the computer, which is what are your thoughts on art made with a computer? And people were pissed. They were not happy about it. There was one person who was like, maybe there's some human touch, but for the most part, they were just like this, like more is death. Like you are the basically just ragging on him. So we've come a long way. I mean, 50 years later, now people are sitting here celebrating generative art. It is like the art of the people on Twitter being like, it's the only type of on-chain generative art. It's the only type of art I'm gonna buy. So I mean, we've absolutely come a long way. I mean, I'm trying to think of some other examples. I mean, some of the early one of the first exhibitions of like computer generated algorithmic art. They wouldn't even call it art. They said computer generated images, and that was very intentional. They did not feel comfortable saying that it was art. And so they're like, let's just kind of show off what we've been doing. Because a lot of these early pieces also were from engineers, a lot of them at IBM, at universities, just trying to figure out or kind of serendipitously coming across the fact that this error that they did with their plotter came out with something kind of abstract. And they're like, wait, can I make art with this? And that's how a lot of like these explorations started. They were engineers just kind of playing around with this. I mean, IBM, not IBM, Bell Labs was like a huge spot for all of these things on like art, music, animation, videos. I mean, so much came from there. They used to have artists in residencies that would like work with them, Lillian Schwartz being one of them. I mean, it was really a really cool time, to be honest, in retrospect.
And so that's what changed? Like, why did it all of a sudden jump the shark and is now being seen as like not only just art, but like a, a future intriguing art style?
Say that again? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just curious what changed, because I think we're in this era
Oh,
right now where we're like AI is probably in the same place that, generative art was
yes.
20, 30
Okay.
years ago.
What changes now? There's a market for it, to be honest. I started selling generative art, like in like 2018, and at that time, we were kind of printing works out. Like I would work with the artist, we kind of go through the algorithms, we maybe like pick one output, print the code with it, and sell that. And like that was fine, but it really limited how I could sell the work or how it could be experienced. I remember having a conversation with an artist being like, maybe one day an artist, like a collector will buy this algorithm for like 100K. Like, wouldn't that be crazy? And then when art blocks came around, I mean, it changed everything. I mean, credit to Larva Labs and Autoglyphs and CryptoPunks, but the art blocks changed all of it. I joined the curation board of them pretty early on, and I remember one of the first releases that they did with ringers, and I had worked with Dimitri for a while, and it was 1,000 pieces, and I was like, "Okay, I'll mint one after lunch," and they minted out in 15 minutes. I was like, "Who are all these people? Like, what do you mean? Like, there are people that are interested in buying generative art." So I think what changed is that people just finally had, like, a mental model that made sense to them, being like, "Okay, I can, um, you know, call onto this algorithm to produce an individual work for me," and that worked.
Man, art blocks gas wars were a time. Like I mean, honestly, I remember sitting there, not for he was for ringers and being like, "Oh God, I can't boost gas that much. No way. You want me to pay how much? Five grand?
Yeah.
Give me a break." And then you're like, "Ah, shit."
It was crazy,
Should
and
should have done that.
at
But
that time, I used to work at JP Morgan for a while, and I remember, like, in between meetings, like, trying to mint certain releases and, like, showing up to meetings, like, sweating, like, "Sorry, guys." Like, so I really had to get that beat. Like, it was such a fun, stressful, but, like, so exciting, all around. Yeah, it was
well,
great.
even then they switched to Dutch auctions, and that was kind of its own game, right? You're kinda sitting there watching, you're like, "Do I buy now?" And then suddenly someone buys and the whole thing sells out
Yep,
before you even
and
realize it
it
hasn't.
every
I did
time.
not like it.
Yeah, me neither,
Yeah.
but damn the scooter, damn the Pluto.
Yeah, yeah.
It was not easy for the art blocks team trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. So,
Yeah.
whew,
Good
yeah.
team. We like them.
Listen, Sophia, I'm curious as like a curator of this artwork and also kind of choosing what artists you work with. Like, how do you decide what gets attention or what is what
Well,
algorithms are actually kind of worthy as like what is art? And I'm also curious how that's changing as now you can just kind of have this prompt based art or actually just use AI to actually generate the code that ultimately spits out the art. So how do you think about the curation side of it?
I mean, I'll always start with like context is key. Like what the artist is trying to say is everything. How they do it is kind of up to them. But when it comes to at least earlier on, I was like my background is in code, like I was a coder for for a few years myself. So being able to actually identify like, holy shit, like they're doing something really cool here. Like this is fast. How like or if I find myself like, how did they do that? Like that's like a big one for me. Like, how the hell did you do that? When the prompt-based generative art came around, I did find myself having like kind of a moment where I was like, "Okay." I remember I bought a work from an AI researcher, I love her work, absolutely adore it, and there was one piece it was the most I had spent on one of her works too, and after I was like, "Can you give me context into, like, the models and how you train?" And she was like, "Oh, I use Dolly," and I was like, "What?" Like, I was like, "What do you mean?" And we're like, it took me a minute to kind of also appreciate the fact that she was able to kind of pull out this output that also was very true to her style. It was saying something, again, and kind of like goes into what are you trying to say? I think now you can't just be like, I made this really pretty landscape using generative AI and expect that to do anything. I think it's um, again kind of a tool. For me having such a visceral reaction to it was actually kind of like an indicator, that something interesting was happening here. It's a big change, but I'm like, "Okay, I need to kind of accept that it's not going anywhere." And now it's like, "All right, artist, it's in your hands. What are you gonna do with it? And give me something good." And there have been some really cool projects, like really cool artists that work with it in engaging ways, in critical ways, trying to pull out the biases, trying to look at like what is happening here. But I mean, I will always love or always appreciate a self-trained model, I will say. It's my preference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just make me feel something, right?
Yeah, yeah. If you can make me feel something, you won. You know, how you did it is really none of my concern, as long as it's done in, like, an ethical way, but that's a whole
Important
other
piece that.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right, right, right.
yeah. Good important disclaimer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we had Jack Butcher on yesterday, who's
Mhm,
I think we say is a really great example of this new age internet artist really leaning into demand and attention, and part of the sort of long, I guess, increasing history of more creators needing to take on more of that business side or
mhm.
distribution side to really be successful. So I'm curious how important is that in your mind to either your work or to the artists you work with? Is like network digital objects the right way to look at these things, or is that just maybe a subsegment of the interesting things you're looking at?
I mean, being an artist is also being a business, and they never wanna admit that. But it's true, and, there are artists that I can't working with an artist who understands that, and is willing to lean into that, I think is one of the most important things, especially, just, like, culturally, like, where we are and kind of understanding and having that pulse is great. I mean, there are some artists who are using these tools in other sort of ways and maybe are a little bit more like they're great public speakers or maybe they're not great public speakers and don't want to talk but they share their work all the time and that's important just like getting out there that there's no argument I think it just around crypto just network effects you want people to see the work to share the work let it be uh spread around as much as possible. I think especially in the digital art space, and with the rise of NFTs, it's really the opposite of traditional art where it's like, I have this work and only I can see it, and that's what kind of makes it valuable. Or like if you're my friend, you can see it at my house. Here, it's like if everyone can see this work all over the place and I own it, it's more valuable. And so I think, yeah, if you can tap into that, it's great.
So when you're curating or acquiring art, like, is that a core thing you look at? Like, is this an artist? Does this artist have the potential to like, are they a good poster? Are they gonna go generate a ton of attention? Are they gonna
Not
aggregate a community? Or
necessarily. So there's, like, the business side, there's also just, I think there's, like, 2 sides of it where we have collectors who are investors and absolutely look at that front, and I acknowledge that and accept it, but there's also a need for a critical curatorial eye that looks beyond that and looks long term and tries to see how the artists are, embracing the technology in new and innovative ways, whether or not current investors or collectors understand that. And my job is to distill that and say, this is an artist worth paying attention to because they're saying something or doing something it's important. And they're good at what they do. The talent is there, the concept is there. That is my job. So there may be works that I want. I mean, my favorite is like finding the up and coming artists. I have my roster, but I'll always share artists that I think are really interesting. That are doing really cool things whether that work is worth $70 or, like or not, like, it doesn't matter. It's just like, pay attention to this artist. This is a cool artist, sort of thing. I love that. It's literally my favorite thing to do.
So I'm really curious about your business.
Yeah.
'Cause now I'm realizing maybe I don't know enough about it. Like,
Yeah.
how does a curator, yeah, make money? Like, how do you
Yeah,
sort of fit into
so
that?
I'm a curator, but I'm also an art dealer. So I sell a lot of art. I sell a lot of art, and I sell a lot of art. And
And those
a
two
lot
things aren't the same in your mind? In my mind, that
No, yes and
okay.
no. So I think that curatorially, like I can work with a museum, which I've done in the past, and help them with their curation, help write the exhibition text for them. That's kind of like for hire as a subject matter expert on generative art and being able to talk about algorithms in the context of art history. And then there's being an art dealer, which is finding and having a roster of artists or working with collectors who want to start a new generative art collection or kind of dabble in it. I'll help them build a starter collection. I'll give them my recommendations. And then, I have relationships with collectors just like long term. So if an artist is that I work with is releasing something, I can share that with them. And we do a lot of private sales. So I think one of the cool, I'd say like whiplashes post drop culture is this need for attention, for like, personal attention. And like, I recognize you as this collector. This is what you like. I'm going to recommend that you buy this based off what I know about your collection, and you can decide whether you want it or not. Great. But private sales have been really wonderful for us, I have to say.
How much is that the art dealing game changing? Like I read the whatever $10 million stuffed shark or whatever. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have like decent context on like how crazy the old world art dealing game is. Like is it still the same or is it changing quite?
See, it's same but different. I think that there's a lot of different, a lot of ways it's similar, a lot of ways that it's different. I think there's an expectation where collectors have relationships with artists, which is not really as common in the traditional art world. It's like you talk to the gallery and you talk to the gallery only, don't even look at the artist, like that's it. Whereas here, I think there's this expectation where you can have a relationship with the artist and you should. So that's one thing. I mean, on the other side, transparency is like a huge thing here. Like people can see when the art moves, where it moves to. One thing though I will say is that we have seen an influx of fiat-based purchases. So someone will say, we want to buy this work, great. I'll send them an invoice, they'll pay me a bank transfer, and then I'll just transfer the work. And so that kind of adds somewhat to goes back to kind of like the opaque nature of the previous market. So, we're seeing things kind of come back away. And even my role as an art dealer, like in the NFT space, like what do you mean? That's this is the antithesis of what everyone was pitching in the early days of NFTs. But, we have an important role. We have to help the artists. My role through and through is supporting the artists and helping them navigate the craziness that is the digital art market.
Can you give a sense of like so obviously generative art had a moment last cycle, like a really big moment.
Mhm.
And I think if you look at the chart back then to now, everything looks down there. But my
Mhm.
sense is that maybe a lot of the sort of financial activity has moved or diffused in ways through
Yeah.
traditional art world. So
Well,
what's your sense of where the market is right now?
the market is that there's a really wonderful group of patrons that absolutely believe in this long term. There were, the speculators have left. The idea that you're going to buy an artwork and be able to flip it for 10x a week later is no longer a reality, and I'm cool with that. I think there's a maturation that's happening. People like art collectors are also being a lot more discerning about what they want and the art that they want to acquire because they're long term hold at this point. There's some that I'm sure whatever, but these are people who believe in the art form, believe in where we are in a culturally significant moment of artists working with computers um to express themselves. So yeah, I think not only that, there's a lot more institutional interests, which is really exciting. A lot more museums approaching, wanting to do really interesting activations, like work with their collections and invite generative artists to work with them. So museums like across Europe, the US, Asia as well. Like it's happening. And it's been cool to see a lot more of the academics come in and be like, okay, let's talk about it.
Maybe very quickly before we let you go, can you give us a few kind of up and coming generative artists that we should take a look at if we're interested in what's happening
Well,
on the frontier?
obviously, everyone on my roster you should take a look at. But for those that are not on my roster, I would say Mika Ben Omar. I'm a really big fan of what she's doing. She does sculptural work, but also a lot of net art. I'm big on net art at the moment. I mean, I always have been a big fan, but I think we're going to see a nice resurgence of that. And then Maya Man. I've always been a fan of Maya Man. I will hype her up any day of the week. Let's see. I'll just oh, and Kevin Esherick. Kevin Esherick is a really cool conceptual artist working with AI. Again, in a really cool conceptual way. So those three.
Awesome. I got some Googling to do.
Yeah.
I got some Googling. Sophia, appreciate you spending some time in your
Yeah.
beautiful theater here
Oh my
at
God,
West.
thank you so much.
It's so regal, such a good setting for you.
I
Great
agree.
positioning. Love it. Yeah.
All right,
Thanks
thank
for
you
coming
so much.
on, and would love to check in with you again, maybe in a couple months, and to see where the art world is going.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thank you guys for having me. It's wonderful.
Thanks, Sophia. Cheers.